Welcome to Sew Very Easy. My name is Laura, and Timeless Treasures has come out with a new fabric called Queen Bee. So I've designed a quilt to go around this fabric that I hope represents, well, the queen and the worker bees dancing in the hives. Here's a look at the fabric that's in that line. So there's a lot of fabrics we can choose from. And to go with this line, there is a nice big border print. So I'll be using that border print and a few of these fabrics to make the quilt. I'll put a link in the description for these 3 pages that have the cutting directions that I will be using to make this quilt. It gives us how much fabric we need and how to cut them, but I would recommend to cut them in this order. For example, fabric 1, which are our little bees, we need to start with 4.5-inch squares. We need 16 of them. So if you cut the one with the fabric at 4.5 inches, cut the 16 blocks, and then recut what's left over into 3.5 by 6.5, we're going to be able to save fabric. Same with the fabric honey. It's the same idea. Start by cutting the largest pieces first. Cut just what you need and then recut the strips into the other pieces. I do have a video on how I like to save fabric by doing this method, and I will put that link in the description. So we have fabric 1, fabric 2, fabric 3, 4, fabric 5, and the big border. But with all of these different fabrics we can choose from, you can always choose your own. The one thing I didn't add in the cutting direction would be for the binding. So you're going to be able to add the binding after, depending on what your binding is going to be. Once you've printed these out, you're going to be able to cut out the fabric and cut out those little blocks and put them right on the appropriate squares. We are going to be making a quilt block, some sashing, and some corner triangles. So for myself, I've put my sashing together, and then I'm going to work on my blocks. So the first thing that we need to do to start this quilt is to make some half square triangles. We're going to need 1A and 1B. We will need 16 of each at 4.5 inches, and that's going to give us 32 half square triangles. So to make those half square triangles, we can place those right sides together, draw a line from corner to corner, and then stitch a 1/4 inch from each side. So put all of the 1A and 2Bs together, and I do have them marked with little stars. So we have 1A and 1B stitched together, cut apart. I did press my seams to the dark side, and then I made sure that this was trimmed down to 3.5 inches. And we will have 32 of these half square triangles. Once the A and B half square triangles are done, we're going to be able to make a block, and we're going to make 16 of these blocks. We will take the 4G, divide that in half, and put it on each side of that half square triangle, and the lighter color is going to be pointing in. F, we get to divide that in 3. So we're going to have them in a row. E, we divide in 2. And then we're going to take that half square triangle pile, divide that up in half, and have that light part pointing into the center. So this is how the block is going to look. The darks are pointing out. We have that dark square going right down the center. 4G on one side and 1E on the other. So we're going to be able to sew these together in 3s, and then we'll be able to put those rows together, and we will have 16 of these blocks. These 16 blocks are the corner of 4 very large 24-inch blocks. So we need to make the middle of the blocks. And that's where 1D and 2C come in. We have 16 3.5 by 6.5, 32 of the same size, Divide that up and they get stitched together. We do have those 3 strips, so they're going to match these 3 strips when they're stitched together. So make 16 units that look like this. Once we have those 16 units together, between these and 5H, which we cut 4 6.5-inch squares, and I did fussy cut them so they'd have the queen bee in the center. This is all it's going to take to make 4 big 24-inch blocks, and our queen will be in the center. So the queen is going to go in the center, and we're going to divide up those long blocks so that the darker piece is coming into the center. So we're going to have 4, 4, 4, and 4 more. And those big blocks that we did are going to go in 4 corners. And we do want that darker piece coming inside. We now have the queen right inside her home. And you can see the light worker bees are around the outside. And we're going to be able to put them together in rows. 1 row, 2, and 3. These blocks now measure 24.5 inches because they will be 24 finished inch blocks. We now get to make some sashing to put these together. And I do have all of my sashing blocks cut out. 1Q, 2J, 3S, 4R, and 6K. We are going to make 12 rows of sashing. So the 3S is in the center. R gets divided in half and goes on each side. 1Q gets divided in half, goes on each side. 2J, divide that in half, and those will go on the side. So we need to make 12 of these rows. These sashing strips are going to go in the center, so I'll be able to make 2 units that look like this. When I'm done with those 2 units, I'm going to be able to put a sashing piece on each end. So I will be using 3 pieces of sashing and 2 blocks. We have 2 long strips done. We need to put the sashing in between and on each side. And this is where those cornerstones, the 6Ks, are going to come in. I did take time and fussy cut some of the little pictures out just to add some extra fun. So we're going to be able to sew those 2 long sashing pieces together, a cornerstone in the center, a cornerstone on each side, and we can make 3 of these units. 1 for the center, that's going to sew those 2 rows together, and 1 for the bottom, and 1 for the top. And once those are stitched on, the center of the quilt is done. That center sashing row finishes off this area, and you can see where those sides finish this shape. So all of those colors line up so that it looks like it's one big block, and it gives us that great shape. Now, if you want to make this bigger, you can continue to make those big blocks and add sashing rows in between. So you're going to constantly finish those shapes. But when we do come to the point where we need to finish it, we need to have a stopping area. And that's where a small first border is going to come in. This is going to help finish that design and stop the eye from wanting to look for more. So this is cut at 1.5 inches. So 2 sides will be 57.5 inches cut. And then once those 2 are on, we're going to have the other 2 sides, which will be cut at 59.5 inches. And then we're going to be able to get to the fun part, which is that big striped border. So let's get that 57.5 inches on the 2 side and 59.5 inches on the other 2. This large stripe border runs along the selvage. So you're able to buy the length that you need, and instead of cutting along the width of the fabric, we're cutting down that length. In this case, we need lengths at 59.5 inches. So you're going to buy that plus a little extra just to make sure you can square off your edges. From there, we can decide where we're going to cut our borders. In this case, we can cut a border so we have the queen and a little edge and do that all the way along, or cut larger borders and then we would have small borders, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to cut out the little ones, and that's going to give me large ones. And it's the large ones that I'm going to want to go around the quilt. Now you can cut this with a rotary cutter, but I do find it's just as easy to take a line and follow. So I'm going to cut all of these long strips out. I'm going to have these as leftovers, and then I will have these 4 nice fat long strips. And they're going to go around the quilt. We have those beautiful big borders and that small little piece. This border print is going to go around the quilt, and we're going to have some half square triangles right here in those corners. We're going to need 2M and 3N and make half square triangles. And with 2 of each, we will end up with 4 of those triangles. We've started with 7.5-inch squares. From there, we're going to be able to trim them down to match this border piece. And when I measure this, I'm looking at 6 3/4. So that's the size that I'm going to make those half square triangles. But you will make them for whatever size you have decided your borders will be. My half square triangles are the same size as these strips. The strips are the size of the quilt, and in my case, they're 59.5 inches. What we're going to do is we're going to sew on 2 sides just with this plain strip, stopping and starting right on those corners. Then with 2 of these strips, we're going to be able to put those half square triangles on one side and on the other side. This now will fit matching this point. And that half square triangle really does give this corner a nice look. It sort of has that same feel to it. And with that black binding, it will really emphasize this corner. This is the center part of the quilt, and that was that sashing. So it still has a nice look to it. The black stop to the pattern, and now we really focus on this border. I do have all of my bees flying in the same direction going around. So I was careful sewing on those half square triangles so that the bees did fly around. So the queen bee is now done. 4 big blocks, and that sashing made those blocks all join together, so it completes those patterns. Of course, you can always make it bigger, just add more blocks and more sashing. That black first border really does anchor it, so the pattern has somewhere to stop, and with the bees buzzing around and that big border, it really does finish it off nice. Now I have to figure out how to quilt it. So if you have any ideas, be sure to put a link in the comment so I'll have some ideas on how to quilt that. I'll also put a link in the description so you can print out this PDF with the cutting directions and how much fabric you are going to need for this quilt. However, if you are going to print it out, I would highly recommend doing it at a computer. For some reason, phones and tablets just will not print out PDFs very well. I do hope you enjoyed today's episode on the Queen Bee, and thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and I do have a newsletter, all under Sew Very Easy. Thanks for joining me. Bye for now.